Hello, good evening and welcome to the Spider's Web for this Halloween special with me, your host, B. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone who sent me offers of support and condolence after the loss of my dear dad. It's been comforting to know that so many people care. I still have a lot to do, but I took a break to bring you this Halloween special, which has also helped me in getting back into the swing of things. All being well, I'll be back with you next year with the creepy, murderous and unsolved accounts that you love. So, happy Halloween. Enjoy. Everyone loves the chance to get away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. And for a special treat, why not a luxury hotel with a natural spa? Over the years it's been a haunt of the rich and famous, but the haunt is more famous than anyone that has ever stayed there these days. The Crescent Hotel and Spa in Arkansas may well be considered the most haunted hotel in America. Steeped in rich heritage and a storied past, the Crescent Hotel and Spa stands as a timeless landmark with a captivating tale to tell. Originally built in 1886, the Crescent Hotel has witnessed the passage of time, embodying the essence of bygone eras while embracing the present. In the year 1879, nestled amidst the breathtaking landscapes of the Ozark Mountains, a remarkable town emerged, known as Eureka Springs. Native Americans originally discovered this haven of natural springs with healing properties, surrounded by lush forests and rugged cliffs. News of this mystical place spread, drawing people from far and wide in search of solace and rejuvenation. Eureka Springs quickly blossomed into a vibrant community, as enterprising individuals flocked to the area, yearning for a touch of magic in their lives. By 1880, 2,000 homes had appeared, and over 15,000 people were residing in Eureka Springs. The Eureka Springs Improvement Company was founded, understanding the town's burgeoning reputation as a healing retreat, and it knew that a grand resort hotel was a necessity to cater to the influx of visitors. Thus, they set their sights on creating a haven of opulence and elegance. In 1886, the iconic Crescent Hotel, an architectural masterpiece, majestically stood atop Crescent Mountain, offering breathtaking views and luxurious accommodations. According to legend, while the Crescent Hotel was being built in 1886, an Irish stonemason named Michael fell to his death from what is now room 218. By all accounts, Michael seems unhappy to be trapped in the very place he met his end. Residents of the room have described doors opening and slamming, the scream of a man falling from the ceiling, and worst of all, hands reaching out of the bathroom mirror towards them. But Michael is not alone. In the 1930s, the Crescent became a cancer hospital run by the unqualified Dr. Norman G. Baker. In the hotel's cellar, Dr. Baker injected his wealthy patients with his patented cure. The experiments were, unsurprisingly, unsuccessful, with most subjects dying, after which Dr. Baker would conduct post-mortems. The souls of his poor victims are allegedly still down there, waiting to be healed. The washers and dryers which now stand where Dr. Baker's patients died are suspected to turn on and off by themselves in the middle of the night. A nurse pushing a gurney has been heard at all hours of the day, and more than one hotel guest has reported seeing Dr. Baker himself, dressed in a white linen suit, purple shirt and lavender tie. There are no mentions of bloodstains on the suit. He was a very hygienic man by all accounts. But the victims of Dr. Baker are not the only unquiet spirits at the Crescent. Employees have claimed to have seen Christmas trees moving from one end of the hall to the other, and dining rooms magically set up after being left in a mess, or morphing into a mess after being set up. One waitress said she saw a Victorian wedding taking place behind her in the mirror, while a cook was sure he spotted a small boy in glasses and old-fashioned clothing skipping round the kitchen. Soon after, he said, pots and pans went flying off the shelves just above Dr. Baker's cellar. Do ghosts attract ghosts, or is it a particular location that attracts the dead? Perhaps we could ask those who have stayed in room 221, where a number of guests have reported being visited by a thin, smiling man in Victorian garb, with his head tilted to one side, who disappears as soon as they turn their back. He has even been said to show people to their room, but never stays to receive a tip. Perhaps he's from one of the couples that are said to dance around the hotel's main salon in the dead of night, forever at a ball they attended when the hotel first opened, and forever condemned to dance. Guests have alleged that they were startled after accidentally going into this room and seeing the spectres spin round and round. Saddest of all is the tale of a man, sat at a table by the window, who says again and again, "I saw the most beautiful woman here last night, and I am waiting for her to return." He's been sat there waiting for over 100 years. The Crescent Hotel and Spa remains open for business, should you wish to make a reservation, although the last owner did die in a mysterious car crash shortly after buying it. London has seen its fair share of macabre historical events, from the Great Plague to Jack the Ripper stalking the streets of Whitechapel over 100 years ago. So perhaps it's not so odd that tales swirl of things less than human stalking its streets. Highgate Cemetery in London N6, in the area of Camden, Haringey and Islington, is no exception. It boasts otherworldly inhabitants, one of which is the Highgate Vampire. But this is no urban legend, it goes far beyond that. So much so that many residents became so wrapped up in the stories that they heard, they joined a mass vampire hunt in 1970. An occultist named David Farrant supposedly first encountered the Highgate Vampire on December the 21st, 1969. Farrant claims he spotted a grey figure that evening and knew instantly it was supernatural. The next year, Farrant asked other Londoners to report any similar experiences. A local newspaper collected multiple stories, which related sightings of a tall man wearing a hat and a gliding spectral form. Perhaps the most interesting report came from a couple who said they came face to face with the vampire in 1963. On February the 27th, 1970, the Hampstead and Highgate Express published an attention-grabbing article about the Highgate Vampire. In it, a priest named Sean Manchester, from an obscure religious sect, said there was a mysterious presence in Highgate Cemetery, a king vampire of the undead. He claimed that the body of a medieval Romanian nobleman and practitioner of the black arts was brought to London in the 18th century. The body was eventually buried in the area that became Highgate Cemetery. Manchester alleged that the vampire was once again stalking London because modern-day Satanists had revived him. To halt its nighttime hunts, the priest suggested digging up the body, driving a stake through its heart, and removing its head and burning it. According to Sean Manchester, numerous residents reached out to him with stories of vampire visitations. Elizabeth Vordewer allowed Manchester to make an audio recording of her, in which she claimed she had 2 red lumps on her neck. Vordewer's boyfriend at the time, Keith McLean, swore she had what he's dubbed an exorcist moment. McLean alleged that a deep male voice came out of Vordewer one night and said,
"I'm going to bring both of you down."
McLean and Manchester performed a series of rituals to save Vordewer's soul. These rituals apparently worked because she made a full recovery and didn't report any further nighttime visitations. As for what was responsible, McLean thinks he has the answer. "I believe it was a vampire, yes. I don't have any doubt about that." On Friday the 13th of March 1970, vampire hunters David Farrant and Sean Manchester set out to expose and destroy the Highgate Vampire once and for all. But they weren't exactly comrades in arms. Farrant and Manchester were at least partly fuelled by a growing rivalry to see who could save London from the undead bloodsucker. A local television channel interviewed the 2 men live, along with several people who claimed to have had supernatural encounters. Between all of the media attention and the superstitions attached to Friday the 13th, Highgate Cemetery was soon swarming with around 100 local residents who wanted to join the hunt. During the hunt, Sean Manchester claims he broke into a catacomb with the intention of stopping the vampire. How did he know which tomb to enter? Because a psychic sleepwalker, a beautiful blonde woman, led him to it. The catacomb in question was, of course, locked up tight, But that didn't stop Manchester and his allies. Instead, they found a hole in the roof and actually climbed down with a rope. Once they were inside, they sprinkled holy water everywhere and put garlic inside empty coffins. Several months after the mass vampire hunt, police found a headless and charred body. The female victim appeared to have died before she was decapitated and burned. Some believe the body had been used as part of a black magic ritual by a coven of witches attempting to raise the vampire. Interestingly, the charred corpse was discovered close to the Highgate catacomb Sean Manchester had broken into on March the 13th. Shortly thereafter, David Farrant began prowling the cemetery grounds with a wooden stake and a crucifix. Police arrested him at least once, but he wasn't charged with anything. David Farrant told local media he found dead foxes in Highgate Cemetery. Initially he said their deaths were a mystery, but after Sean Manchester claimed the foxes were almost certainly the prey of the vampire, the story changed. Over time, what once had been a few dead foxes became several foxes that were completely drained of blood. These unfortunate animals were also rumoured to have been found riddled with bite marks. Sean Manchester wrote a book about his vampire hunting tales, entitled The Highgate Vampire, The Infernal World of the Undead Unearthed at London's Highgate Cemetery and Environs. In it, he claims he had gained access to a tomb in Highgate Cemetery a few months after the 1970 vampire hunt. After prying the lid off a coffin, he discovered a female vampire, though his friend talked him out of driving a wooden stake through the vampire's heart. In 1973, Manchester found the same corpse in a nearby cellar. This time he took care of the problem for good by staking and burning the vampire's body. David Farrant's obsession with the supernatural and Highgate Cemetery eventually put him behind bars. In 1974, officers charged him with offering indignity to the dead, along with desecration and vandalism. Farrant still maintains that he's innocent of these charges and blames the cemetery damage on Satanists. Was the Highgate vampire truly slain? If you believe the stories that began swirling around again in London in 2016, the evil creature survived. People reported seeing a floating man in a suit and top hat, gliding through the Highgate Cemetery's locked gates with ease. One man even claimed to have snapped a photograph of the eerie figure. Look to the left of the photograph above. Is someone looking back at you? Some other reports of supernatural goings-on in the cemetery include a man whose car broke down near the cemetery, who saw a frightful apparition with red glowing eyes, a man who was attacked by a creature that came out of the cemetery wall as he walked by it, and which dissolved when a car drove by, blinding it with its headlights, a spectral cyclist seen riding in front of the gates by various witnesses, a shrouded figure, a morose female spectre who looks up at the sky and ignores those around her. If approached, she vanishes, only to appear further along, repeating the same action. The ghost of a mad old woman, whose long grey hair blows behind her, as she rushes among the graves in search of the children she allegedly killed in a fit of rage. The ghosts of both a woman in white and a nun have reportedly been seen, along with a figure wading into a pond, and a pale gliding form. People also claim to have heard heart-stopping banshee wails, whispers, bells ringing, and footsteps. Many people report an inexplicable sense of unease or dread whilst in the cemetery. So the question is, dear viewer, would you venture into Highgate Cemetery, either during the day or at spooky night time? In August 1966, Jean and Joe Pritchard moved into 30 East Drive in Pontefract, West Yorkshire, with their two children, Philip 15 and Diane 12. It wasn't long after they moved in that strange things started to occur. This is the story of the haunting at 30 East Drive. From the outside of the house, 30 East Drive looks just like any other council-built house from the 1950s, although its previous inhabitants would tell a rather different story of the sinister goings-on inside the building. It all started soon after the Pritchards moved in. Dust began to float around them in the room, which seemed odd, but then it quickly settled surrounding them. In an attempt to quickly clean it up so as not to cause panic, Mrs. Kelly, the children's aunt, quickly ran to the kitchen to grab some cleaning products. It was here that she looked on in shock, as a mysterious pool of water was appearing on the kitchen floor. Suddenly, multiple different pools of water started appearing all over the kitchen. Over the years, while the Pritchards lived in the haunted 30 East Drive, they endured many hauntings and paranormal encounters. Some strange goings-on included green-coloured foam coming out of the taps and toilets, even though the water had been turned off. The lights would consistently turn on and off. The cupboards would shake violently from time to time. Photographs and pictures were shredded. Plants apparently leapt out of their plant pots, and furniture moved on its own. Despite becoming utterly terrified, the family refused to leave their wonderful home. They became accustomed to the unusual happenings, so much so that they decided to name the poltergeist Fred. Despite their refusal to leave their home, the Pritchards were determined to rid the place of Fred in order to gain some peace and normality back into their lives. They attempted to perform exorcisms with the help of trained professionals, to which Fred mocked their attempts and on occasion became angry and attacked people physically. When Fred became angry, there was no telling what hell he would put the Pritchards through. On many occasions when the Pritchards would splash holy water, the walls would mysteriously start to leak fluid. He would even lift up objects in the house, such as heavy items of furniture, moving them through the air. The youngest child of the Pritchards, Diane, who was 12 at the time of moving in, became the main focus of the hauntings. It is considerably rare for a poltergeist to cause physical bodily harm to a physical entity such as Diane, but as she grew older, the attacks got worse and worse. As Diane grew, she was attacked by Fred and was even dragged screaming up the stairs. Other violence towards Diane from the poltergeist included face slapping, being physically pulled out of bed while she was sleeping, and her hair being yanked from her head. Diane ended up severely traumatised, finger marks clearly distinguishable on her throat. The malevolent entity or poltergeist known as Fred, or the Black Monk, is believed to be currently one of the most violent poltergeists in Europe. He has been making his presence known for more than 50 years. Throughout the time that Fred has been causing mayhem, there have been many different explanations given regarding to who the entity is. He is known by the press as Mr. Nobody. He received the nickname the Black Monk when he appeared as an apparition. He was supposedly wearing long black robes. So what is happening at 30 East Drive today? It's now currently owned by film producer Bill Bungay, who purchased the house after making the film When the Lights Went Out, which was based loosely on the Pritchards' experiences. The house is currently open for visitors and tours, although the owners thoroughly discourage people from staying the night. The website even states that 30 East Drive is far from a traditional bed and breakfast, and any visitors staying at the property will not be covered by insurance if they do choose to visit. Along Highway 8, a few kilometres south of Alexandra, deep in the region of central Otago, on the South Island, you will pass Butcher's Gully. It's an isolated area used mainly for gold mining until the mines were swamped by the Butcher's Gully Reservoir, which was built between 1935 and 1937. It was created to serve as a water supply for Alexandra, but is now used for irrigation. The location once housed a store and a butcher, and a hotel, but not much else, and now they are long gone. This particular strip of road seems to hold some mystery and intrigue. One is of a cyclist, seen from time to time, and not a modern one either. The man in question is old, with a grey beard, wearing a cheese-cutter hat and a dirty brown plaid coat. He rides a very old rusty bike, in an awkward and wobbly manner, like he's struggling to propel himself along. His socks are pulled up to his knees, and his brown plaid trousers are tucked in. He has caused some concern to the people who've seen him, for a couple of reasons. For one, he is literally miles from anywhere. There are no houses or buildings nearby. For another, he's cycling so slowly that it would take him many, many hours to reach anywhere safely. Although some people have speculated that he lives off the grid, a lot of others feel sure that what they've seen isn't human, as he didn't look or move quite right. One witness account from a couple that drove past him states that the driver looked back in his rearview mirror for a second glance, only to find that the old man had disappeared on a long straight road within a matter of seconds. Mysterious glowing spheres of light have also been reported, travelling at great speeds along this deserted highway. One witness told his account back in the 1970s on Radio Pacific, a talk radio station. He and his wife were on a driving holiday around South Island in a hire car. The man said they were followed by two glowing spheres of light while they drove along Highway 8 in the dark. There was one on each side of the car, but they were travelling a short distance behind. All of a sudden the spheres sped right up to the car's rear windscreen, blinding them for a second, before speeding ahead and disappearing around a bend, at what the couple stated was an unbelievable speed. The couple were adamant that what they witnessed was neither another car or a motorcycle. In the centre of Auckland, New Zealand, there is a massive public park known as Auckland Domain. It is around 184 acres of green space, museums, walking trails, sports fields, sculptures and gardens. Tucked away off Garden Road in a spot known as Watson's Bequest, there is a small pond. At the side of the pond is a sculpture, different from the others. It is said to depict or honour 3 witches who were executed in Auckland Domain centuries ago by being hung from the very tree under which the sculpture is placed. It is unclear when the witches appeared or why, and it's not clear whether they were witches in the European sense or witches of an indigenous variety. It is said that these 3 witches haunt Auckland Domain, eager to wreak vengeance on those who condemned them to death. If you walk through certain areas of the park at night, it's said you might hear a low growl or a cackling laugh over your shoulder, but if you turn round, you'll see no one there. You may see a tall thin figure wandering through the trees, or a dark shadow swinging from branch to branch high above you. You might feel a chill, or you might feel a set of eyes upon you even though you're alone. You might suddenly find yourself covered in cuts and scratches, like something has gouged at your skin with long sharp claws. And if you drive down the road leading to the spot where the witches were hanged, stop your vehicle and turn off your headlights. You might just be able to call them out to play. Robin Hood's Bay is a village in North Yorkshire, England. It is 6 miles south of Whitby and 15 miles north of Scarborough on the Yorkshire coast. The village, which consists of a maze of tiny streets, has a tradition of smuggling, and there is reputed to be a network of subterranean passageways linking the houses. One of the more gruesome ghost stories in Yorkshire is the tale of Bert Marshall. His ghost is said to haunt the railway track at the top of Robin Hood's Bay on moonless nights. Unusually, his spirit clasps a pair of dentures, the same ones he stole from a corpse to replace his own teeth. His death, however, is even more gory. A poor farmer who was unable to afford a horse, he walked along the railway line every Friday night to his favourite pub, the Windhill Inn. One drunken night while walking home, he fell asleep on the railway tracks. A train sped towards him and decapitated him. When the police arrived, they could find no sign of his head, only his lifeless body. Bert's headless ghost has been known to drift around the track ever since, making a clacking sound with his dentures to try and find his missing head. In 17th century England, it didn't take much to be accused of witchcraft. Such was the case for York resident Marmaduke Buckle. Buckle was severely disabled in multiple ways, and that was enough for accusatory fingers to point in his direction. After years of isolation in his home on Goodram Gate and too many whispers and accusations, the young man, only 18 years of age, carved his initials, year of birth, and the current year, which was 1715, on a beam, from which he then hanged himself. To this day, ghostly sounds abound in the two buildings that were once his house. Bumps and knocks, lights being switched off, and doors slamming unexpectedly. His ghost is certainly angry, but seemingly not malevolent. This is a classic ghost legend in every sense of the word. Habits of the living that repeat after death, things that go bump in the night, a grudge that keeps the ghost around when they should be resting. While his ghost is locally known as the Stickman, the living man was an 18th century resident of 35 Stonegate. He was a paranoid, curmudgeonly old man with a fear that turned to habit. The old man was terrified of being burgled in his sleep, and so to ward off potential intruders into his home, he would whack his stick against the wall every night as the bells of York Minster rang. To this day, the thudding of his stick continues to be heard in the dead of night. Perhaps the ghost doesn't know he's dead. Perhaps his fear and paranoia lives on. Perhaps he is just that stubborn. Perhaps York's most famous ghost stories are those of the Roman soldiers. These are a great example of ghosts that behave more like memories on a loop than conscious malevolent spirits. What is now the cellar of the treasurer's house was once, many centuries ago, a Roman road. These days, visitors to that cellar often report sightings of Roman soldiers dressed in armour and carrying shields, and even sometimes leading their horses. The most famous of these sightings is that of Harry Martindale, who, before joining the local police force, worked as an engineer. One day, while working in the cellar of the treasurer's house, he witnessed the Roman soldiers emerging from the walls, in full garb, with horses in tow. When he ran upstairs to describe what he'd seen, the curator said to him, "By the look of you, you've seen the Roman soldiers." The most haunted pub in York is also one of the most haunted pubs in England. The Golden Fleece has converted the most stalwart sceptics into believers of ghosts and haunted places. One such sceptic was a bar manager who refused to listen to the stories until she saw the hauntings for herself. A ghostly presence, the sound of keys rattling, and even an ice-cold hand stroking her spine were enough to change her tune. With the Golden Fleece being a York hotel as well as a pub, it's common for guests to have their own ghostly encounters, with one of the most common being a woman who roams the corridors at night. The Golden Fleece enjoys its label as the most haunted pub in York and leans into it with some creepy aesthetic, as well as Halloween events like the telling of ghost stories. I hope you've enjoyed this Halloween special. Now I've got my mojo back a bit, hopefully I shall be producing more videos in the future. So stay tuned, don't forget to set your notifications and look out on social media. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope you have a really good Halloween. And never forget, stay spooky.